Here is the mighty Vectrex arcade system. What could possibly be cooler than combining the Vectrex with the Sega Genesis? Not much. And there's no game console that does this, but there is a controller. The Vectrex Sega Genesis controller. Even though it says Sega Genesis and Vectrex, this is not an official Sega or Vectrex product. How does it work? Because the Vectrex plug is remarkably similar to the Sega Genesis and Atari 2600 plug. With a bit of modification, you can see that it actually works. Here's a look at the standard Vectrex controller. Here's the normal old school Sega Genesis 3-button gamepad. But if you include the start button, it actually does have 4 buttons. The big question is, does it work? Is this a controller that I want for the Vectrex? Because the Vectrex controller is actually not that bad, but this is a lot better. Although the Vectrex controller has analog movement. Not that many games use it. So let's take a look at the Sega Genesis Vectrex controller with a variety of games here and see how it compares to the standard Vectrex controller. Here's a look at the front of the Vectrex. This is the speaker where all of the sounds come out of. This is the reset button. Here's the on and off switch. This is where the controllers would plug into. You can fit 2 controllers. Here's the modified Sega Genesis Vectrex controller. We're going to plug that into controller port 1. Fits in just fine. You get a lot more cord with the Sega Genesis controller than you do with the Vectrex controller. That's a good thing because the Vectrex controller is actually pretty short. The cord for the controller is pretty short. Not that you're really going to be standing that far away from the Vectrex because the screen is right there. And so am I. Hi. Looks like there'll be a bit of a reflection in this review. Whatever. You can see my hands and my shorts. Big deal. Okay, here's the game cartridge for Berserk on the Vectrex. We'll plug that into the side here. That's where Vectrex cartridges go. Pick up the modified Sega Genesis controller and turn on the Vectrex. That makes me happy every time I hear it. You gotta dance to the intro songs. Just one of those things. Okay. And we'll start. In Berserk, this works really well. Here's a good place to show you what all the buttons do, because every button in Berserk does the same thing. They fire. A button, B button, C button, start button. Doesn't help me escape Evil Auto, though. Not when I'm not paying attention. Movement is really nice. Very easy to pull off diagonal shots. No big surprise there, the Sega Genesis Vectrex controller works well with Berserk, but how does it work for Solar Quest, a game that actually uses 4 buttons for different things? It's Solar Quest time, one of my favorites on the Vectrex. Okay, now here's where it tells you what all the different buttons do. So you have Hyper, Nuke, Thrust, and Fire. This will show you what each of the buttons on the modified Genesis controller does. Obviously that turns. That's, well, try not to fly into the sun, but okay, that's your thrusting. That fires. Hyperspace. And Nuke. Okay, it's pretty easy. Oh yeah. Definitely prefer this. The Genesis controller is outstanding for spaceship shooting games. So let's see how it works with Konami's Scramble on the Vectrex. This is a old school side-scrolling spaceship shooter. Yeah, this is great. This is a definite improvement. Feels like I'm playing Thunder Force 3 or something. Okay, here's a good place to show you the D-pad in action, maneuvering in the tight caverns in Scramble. I've proven that the Sega Genesis Vectrex controller works better for spaceship shooters and some arcade games like Berserk, but how does it work for games like Hyper Chase that actually have analog controls? Okay, here's an example of a game where the button configuration is a bit awkward. Pushing the start button makes the gears go up, the A button makes them go down, this accelerates, this brakes. And yes, you only have steering all to one side. Okay, well, it doesn't work for Hyper Chase. Yeah, you want to use a normal Vectrex controller for this one. Let's check it out with Web Wars. This does not have analog controls. Basically, if you have a Vectrex and you're already into collecting Vectrex games, it's no big deal to pick up one of these. They don't cost all that much. Where do you find one? Search online. eBay's a great place to start. It's not an official product, as you can see. Do you need the Sega Genesis modified Vectrex controller? Not really. It's actually a nice replacement for the standard Vectrex controller. If you happen to need two controllers and you buy a Vectrex used, it only comes with one. Pick up one of these. It does work better for Scramble and Berserk, without question, and probably a number of the other arcade-style games on the Vectrex. It just doesn't do the analog steering. I know from experience that if you buy a Vectrex, you might get a controller that's beat up, that doesn't have a properly working joystick. If you're technically savvy, you can probably fix that, but these are expensive to replace and find working Vectrex controllers. This is a nice option. So, now you know the Sega Genesis Vectrex controller is like taking the awesome train to Funky Town. No! A Giants Classic Game Room thank you to Rob in San Diego for loaning this to Classic Game Room. Uh-oh. Here comes the Cosmic Dragon. Now I'm in for it. Aha! You missed it. Because I'm flying with the Sega Genesis gamepad. Stupid ass Cosmic Dragon.